J'ouvre maintenant la séance.
I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 43 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, February 3rd, 2022. The committee is now meeting to study intercity transport by bus in Canada. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. Pursuant to the House Order of November 25th, 2021, members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application.
Appearing before us today as witnesses, we have, as an individual, Dr. Jacob Al-Hassan, Assistant Professor, Department of Community Health and Epidemiology, College of Medicine, University of Saskatchewan. Dr. Cindy Hansen, Professor, Department of Sociology and Social Studies, the University of Regina, joining us by video conference. From Coach Atlantic Maritime Bus, we have Michael Cassidy, owner, joining us by video conference. From the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, we have Matt Gemmel, Director, Policy and Research, by video conference. And from Casper Transportation, we have Mr. Casper Wabinski, President, also joining us by video conference. I'd like to take this opportunity to inform members that all of today's video conference witness participants have completed the necessary audio-visual checks. And once again, I'll look over to our esteemed translators to get the thumbs up and make sure everything is good on their end. Perfect. Thank you. We will now begin the opening remarks with Dr. Jacob Al-Hassan for 5 minutes. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Let me start by acknowledging that I'm joining you today from Saskatoon, or Treaty 6 territory, the traditional homeland of the Métis. I pay my respects to the First Nations and Métis ancestors of this land. Over the past years, I've had the opportunity to conduct research on how the absence of intercity public transportation affects marginalized communities. Based on my findings, I believe that Canada needs a national public transportation system. First, public transportation promotes access to opportunities and services, and this ultimately improves population health. Access to safe, reliable, and inclusive intercity public transportation is connected to road traffic accidents, healthcare, and other outcomes. Countries with well-funded health bus systems have lower accident rates because buses are less prone to accidents than private vehicles. So, for example, comparisons with other OECD countries reveal that Canada has higher traffic fatality rates than the OECD average. And this is likely because there are few public transport options. For this reason, people rely on private vehicles, which have a much higher likelihood of being involved in collisions than buses. Additionally, access to safe and reliable bus travel reduces transport poverty and facilitates access to economic and other opportunities. Whether or not people can access healthcare, groceries, and other services depends on the availability of consistent, reliable, and safe public transportation. Public transportation is also much better for the environment because while a bus may carry, say, 50 people from one city to another, absence of a bus means, 50 cars on the road, or perhaps 25 if people are driving in pairs. Although absence of public transportation negatively affects all people, these impacts are never felt equally, but disproportionately affect seniors, Indigenous communities, women, people with disabilities, youth, and other vulnerable and marginalized populations. In Canada, these realities have been compounded and acutely felt by many following the loss of the Greyhound Bus Company. I want to share a story about how the loss of a public intercity bus system in Saskatchewan caused untold suffering among the most marginalized. In 2017, the Saskatchewan Transportation Company, or STC, a 70-year-old bus service, was shut down by our provincial government as part of an austerity budget. At the time of the closure, the STC had a fleet of 41 buses connecting about 253 communities and traveling 2.8 million miles per year. The closure of STC without any research evidence, ostensibly to save 85 million, provides an important case study to understand what happens when we lose intercity public transportation. So the STC had relied on a balanced scorecard system, providing its services not for profit, but to facilitate access to key services for some of the most vulnerable people in the province. For example, patients traveling for physician-prescribed treatments could obtain a medical pass for $54, and this enabled unlimited travel on a specified travel corridor for 30 days. To put things in context, the STC's annual operation grant of $14.2 million meant that the bus system cost only about $14 per person to run. Saskatchewan's health system relied on the buses to transport vaccines and equipment, and STC's closure left it stranded. Many health workers had to unpleasantly inform patients that their medications was unavailable because there was no bus to transport these medications. Additionally, the loss of the bus led to isolation and a disproportionate driving burden, often borne by middle-aged women who assumed the role of caregivers for ailing relatives. I developed the concept of the web of dispossession to highlight this complexity. Lack of public transportation affects all of us, even if we do not realize it. There are so many stories I could share about how the absence of a public bus system affects people. And I want to share the story of someone I interviewed 3 years ago. So Louise was a 60-year-old Indigenous woman from Quapel, Saskatchewan, and she's a grandmother who has worked in Indigenous social work. Louise suffers from paralysis, and at the beginning of our interview, she asked me if I knew what it was like to be paralyzed. Although it was a simple question, it had never crossed my mind. Because Louise needed to attend regular treatments for cancer and faced several challenges doing this, she used a wheelchair, which came at a significant cost. Given the unpredictability of the weather, she described many situations where she would have preferred a public bus. She recounted one example where she was stuck in a blizzard, and this is a quote from her. I had a catheter. Then by standing on the side of the road because of the blizzard, the motor filled up with snow and wouldn't stay running because it had so much snow in it. This was not a predicted blizzard. That's the thing that you deal with. It could be nice on this side of the valley, but the other side of the valley when you're driving, it could be horrible. That's exactly what happened. I had to wait and get rescued. Now, who needs that when they are sick? It was so cold in that car that there were ice crystals forming in my urine bag. Stories like this highlight the importance of creating a national public transportation system to ensure that people can access needed services without such profound loss of human dignity. In many ways, our current status quo is exclusionary and problematic. In a country like Canada, where it is widely believed that the health system is robust and healthcare is free at the point of use, there are many among us who cannot exercise their right to health. No matter how well we improve health services, people need to be able to get to these services for them to make a difference. Canada needs a national public transportation system guided by human rights principles, equity, and inclusion, rather than profit or typical cost-benefit analyses. We need a national public transportation system to ensure access to healthcare and other services and reduce vulnerability of key subpopulations. Saskatchewan's experience provides a morbid cautionary tale.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alhassan. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to cut your opening remarks off there. Next, we have Dr. Hansen. Dr. Hansen, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes for your introductory remarks.
Thank you for inviting me to present. I want to start by acknowledging the Indigenous Territory, Treaty 6, and homeland of the Métis I am situated on today. I've been a public transportation user and researcher currently residing in Saskatchewan in a community with no access to public transportation since the shuttering of STC. I was asked by this committee to speak about intercity transportation. I'd like to start by saying it's important that we consider intercity transportation as beyond cities, that is interregional or intercommunity, because if we don't do this, there is a loss in citizen voice from people living in rural and remote locations, some 20 to 30% of the population, depending upon where you live. Transportation systems need to be inclusive and citizen-led. What do I mean by this? When public systems are replaced by private ones, citizens are replaced by consumers. I'm concerned that a policy focus on urban centers and private transportation speaks to a loss of citizen voice and participation. The absence of framing policy around all citizens creates a risk that some, i.e. citizens in rural areas, the elderly, Indigenous, those with mobility issues, etc., become second-class citizens. This is not how Canada was built, and our communities are interconnected. Rural support the urban, urban support the rural, and that's how Canada was structured. Therefore, the starting point needs to be more than intercity. Secondly, in developing transportation policy, Canada needs to consider not only rural and remote and how transportation to and from these areas is structured and sustained, but how populations are not homogeneous. Two examples of this are Highway of Tears in northern British Columbia, a location until recently not serviced by public transportation, and an area of high number of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And another is citizens with mobility issues. The Highway of Tears was notorious, particularly for Indigenous women hitchhiking because no bus service existed until recently. As someone now living north of Prince Albert, I am grossly aware of how northern Saskatchewan is quietly on its way to becoming another Highway of Tears. Calls for Justice 4.8 in the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls report, as well as calls for safe resource allocation in the TRC reports, both speak to needs to address these. The second class of citizens without access to transportation are people with mobility issues, like my friend Terry Sleva. Terry is in a wheelchair and since the end of STC has not had bus access. Without access, she is part of a mobility underclass, and her transportation disadvantage limits her ability to work, to access basic services, and to contribute for society. It took Terry 2 years of fighting a legal case with Transport Canada when finally she was awarded access on a private carrier in Saskatchewan. Lack of transportation in these examples and more means lack of safety and a lack of participation in society. Transportation needs to be about more than those who can pay. And it has to ensure that we have democratic decision-making, equitable outcomes, opportunities, and community benefits. This includes access to healthcare before, after, and during a pandemic. Mobility shapes how we live our lives. And if, for example, citizens in a city have access to subsidies on public transit of up to 60%, why can't the same rights exist for people in rural and remote locations of Canada? The removal of Greyhound demonstrates that transportation needs to be public and not designed on economics only. Greyhound stopped operating because it was no longer profitable for it to do so. Social, health, environmental, and other factors need to be considered in the policy. They can be designed, monitored, and evaluated with a public lens to equality, safety, and accessibility. And an example of this would be to look at the STC scorecard. When STC was shuttered, the public were told private industry would take over. That hasn't happened. Only one still operates in Saskatchewan and only on the routes that are profitable. Although a special interest group might step forward to meet the needs of people in a community, that only creates gaps for people who aren't part of that special need group. So mobility rights are human rights. Canada signed the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, but with current barriers to movement, these freedoms cannot be realized. Finally, I conclude with key recommendations from our study, Here Today, Gone Tomorrow. These include further research, community planning on public transportation, mobility with attention to diversity of users and vulnerable groups, and looking at factors beyond economic indicators. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hansen. Next, we have Mr. Cassidy. Mr. Cassidy, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes. Sorry, Mr. Cassidy, I believe you're still on mute, sir.
Thank you. Inner city busing is a very low margin, highly capital intensive industry with many well-documented financial challenges. 2012, Orleans tells the Maritime region it has to surrender its motor carrier rights, losing $2 million a year. 2014, Orleans tells the Quebec government it's losing $3.5 million a year, risking low revenue routes in the province of Quebec. 2018, Greyhound pulls out of what they call the unprofitable West. 2020, 2021, COVID did its best to halt this industry. 2021, Greyhound ceases operations in Canada and sells their USA operations. Yes, this industry needs a model. We have been positioning a model for the past 4 years. We have presented this model to standing committees, roundtables, Rural Caucus, Atlantic Caucus, government officials, policy advisors, and we met with our Minister of Transport when he was in Halifax in March of this year. It is a model that is based on the following. One, it has to be collaborative, nothing to do with jurisdiction. Number two, rural-urban connectivity has to be a priority. We have to acknowledge that public transit on provincial highways is no different than public transit on municipal streets. Ticket pricing must be affordable. Service must be accessible. And we have to acknowledge that for-profit carriers have been the backbone of this industry. The ask in this business model going forward is very straightforward. For the next generation of infrastructure funding, we are suggesting inner city busing should be identified as an eligible project. And for-profit carriers should be identified as eligible recipients in future capital infrastructure funding. And collaboration versus jurisdiction is very important. When you try to present this model, you have to make sure that the provinces are on side. And in this year, April, we wrote the 3 maritime provinces. We thanked them for their support during COVID for maritime bus. But more importantly, we said a capital infrastructure program, it helps lower acquisition costs of buses, would help cash flow, creating a sustainable operating model and alleviate many potential requests for annual operating subsidies. We gave them an example where if 25 buses for line run, intercity, were purchased for the maritime provinces, a cost sharing, $8 million from a federal program, $6 million at 30% from the provinces of the Maritimes, and 30% from maritime bus, $6 million, and $8 million, $6 million, and $6 million contribution, new buses fully accessible within our maritime region. I am very pleased to make mention here this evening that the provinces, the 3 maritime provinces, with Newfoundland, Labrador joining them in July of this year, wrote to the Minister of Transport, Minister of Infrastructure, suggesting that they can confirm we are interested in reviewing any merit-based applications for the support of inner city bus. The 4 provinces said it was an important service that provides considerable value to Atlantic Canadians. Our hope is that our region's inner city busing will continue to operate. In closing, we have intercity identified as a very valuable and a very important service. We have a solution. We have collaboration. Now we need policy changes. People ask us at Maritime Bus, why do you do it? We answer, it's the right thing to do. I hope going forward, this committee agrees it is the right thing to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cassidy. Next, we have Mr. Gemmell. Mr. Gemmell, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Bonsoir and good evening to all of the members of the Standing Committee. I'm calling in today from FCM's offices in the city of Ottawa. And as FCM moves forward with our commitment to reconciliation, we acknowledge that our head offices are located on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, whose presence here reaches back to time immemorial. I'm very pleased to be here on behalf of FCM's more than 2,000 member municipal governments from coast to coast to coast. Inter-community passenger bus service is a critical issue for municipalities in all regions of the country. And so I want to start by thanking the committee for choosing to study this important topic. There's no doubt that providing reliable, affordable, and effective passenger bus service in a nation as vast as ours is a challenge, and we've heard that already tonight. The loss of Greyhound routes was a terrible blow for Canadians in rural regions, particularly those in areas where transportation options were already limited. And it follows similar announcements over the past decade, impacting Acadian Bus, and as we already heard tonight, the STC, Saskatchewan Transportation Corporation, on the prairies. And this marks a concerning trend. We're not going in the right direction. These challenges aren't new, and yet we still lack a coordinated approach to passenger bus service in this country. And FCM's sincere hope is that this study is a catalyst for concrete action by the federal government in partnership with provinces, territories, with municipalities, and with Indigenous governments. As the committee has already heard in the course of your study, passenger bus service is a critical element of an equitable and sustainable national transportation system. It's not only vital for economic development, especially in a rural context, but also a key contributor to public safety and community well-being. There's a direct link between the lack of affordable and safe transportation options in certain regions and violence against Indigenous women, girls, and the Two-Spirit and LGBTQ+ communities. And as we've already heard tonight, the National Inquiry on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls recommended improved rural and remote transportation options for exactly this reason. Les services.
Intercity bus services are also key to achieving a zero-emission transport system. Across the country, emissions from the transportation sector are on the rise. Municipalities and the federal government have chosen to invest in urban public transport as a priority. This partnership enables cities and communities to develop transportation systems that will enable communities to become carbon neutral by 2050.
As we look at greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector, we must not forget intercommunity travel. Canadians need affordable public transit options, be it bus or train, between communities, reducing the number of single passenger vehicles on our highways, even as we shift to electric vehicles and low carbon fuels. For municipal leaders, the question of how to move Canadians safely and reliable between communities has only grown in urgency. At our 2021 annual conference, shortly after the announcement that Greyhound would be reducing service in the Canadian market, municipal delegates voted to adopt a resolution calling for urgent federal support for intercommunity passenger bus service. The resolution calls on the federal government to take leadership on this issue by identifying a lead federal department, most likely Transport Canada, and working with the provinces and territories to develop and implement a long-term funding model for passenger bus services for all regions of the country. The federal government's mandate set out in the Canada Transportation Act is to contribute to the development of a competitive, economic, and efficient national transportation system. And it's in that spirit that FCM's members adopted the resolution last year. The federal government has a critical role to play in terms of coordinating and funding this essential public service. One of the key messages that I want to leave with you today, and that I'm hoping we can discuss more in the Q&A, is that we aren't starting here from scratch. We have some of the elements of a comprehensive national system already in place, and we've heard some of that already tonight. There are regions of the country that are covered by passenger rail, and the federal government is rightly looking to expand and improve rail service in the Toronto to Quebec City corridor. And over time, passenger rail service could be added elsewhere in the country as well, starting with existing underutilized short line infrastructure. We have a long history in this country of publicly run or publicly subsidized passenger bus companies at the provincial and regional level. We've heard some examples of those tonight. And as the committee heard last week, we're seeing more private and nonprofit carriers enter the market since Greyhound's departure on certain routes and in certain regions of the country, and these can be supported to expand further. And lastly, the federal government already has funding programs for public transit already in place, notably the Rural Transit Solutions Fund that was announced in 2021. There's a very strong existing federal municipal partnership on public transit, and we can build on that. And I'd be happy to speak more about that during the Q&A. And so FCM is calling on the federal government to build on these existing elements and work with provincial, territorial, municipal, and Indigenous governments to create a national approach that includes a sustainable funding model in partnership with provinces and territories. Such a plan should be developed in consultation with municipalities to ensure it reflects local realities as much as possible. And the federal government should work to ensure that any strategy to address gaps in service avoids a one-size-fits-all approach.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gemmell. Unfortunately, there's no time remaining. Next, and finally, for introductory remarks, we have Mr. Wabinski. Mr. Wabinski, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Hello, everyone. We're based in Thunder Bay, Ontario. We operate scheduled routes from Winnipeg to the west, Sioux Lookout and Longuelac to the north, and as far east as White River. We operate 16 buses on 4 daily routes delivering parcels and providing critical essential charter services and scheduled service. To give a perspective of the area
Sorry,
we
Mr.
serve,
Wabinski, we're just going to do a sound check here. You're coming in quite light. We want to make sure that all members, including our translators, can hear you. If you can get your mic closer to your mouth, please, that might be helpful. We'll give that a try.
How about this? Is that better?
Look around. It's a
One, two,
little
one,
bit
two.
better, but
I'll speak louder, maybe.
yeah, would it be possible to you're going to increase it, or are you asking him to increase it?
We're going to call him to show him how to do it.
Okay.
I have it on maximum volume.
All right, Mr. Wabinski, we'll just troubleshoot here. If you could just give us 1 minute, please.
Yeah.
What we're going to do, Mr. Wabinski, we're going to suspend the meeting for just 2 minutes so that the sound technicians here can call you and work out the issue. We just want to make sure that all of the translators can hear you and that the members can hear your testimony. So the meeting will be suspended for 2 minutes, and I ask for the patience of all witnesses joining us by video conference. Thank you.
Get started.
I call this meeting back to order. Mr. Wabinski, I'd ask you to please restart your remarks. Thank you very much for your patience. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you for that. Hello, everyone. We are based in Thunder Bay, Ontario. We operate scheduled routes from Winnipeg to the west, Sioux Lookout and Long Lac to the north, and as far east as White River. We operate 16 buses on 4 daily routes, delivering parcels, providing critical essential charters, and most importantly, scheduled services. To give a perspective of the area we serve, we travel daily 4,000 to 5,000 kilometers per day. I will make a strong opening statement. Today's intercity bus network is a national embarrassment. The biggest problem with intercity busing in our country is that we have a handful of operators that service limited regions in an inconsistent localized approach. Half the provinces have proven over and over again that they have little interest in this file. There's no leadership, and furthermore, Ontario has a major conflict of interest with potential concerns for violations of Federal Competition Act. Today, operators are acting of their own accord, doing what is best for their companies. That is the result of eliminating Provincial Highway Transportation Board and stands as proof of provincial priorities. Without a vision, a plan, and guidance, we will never see a coherent Trans-Canada bus route. We cannot ever allow again one company to hold our country hostage by monopolizing Canada like a few entrants are working towards doing. It needs to be a coalition of like-minded operators working to achieve a federal vision. Far too often, intercity busing is used by our provinces as a political bargaining chip. Besides the maritime provinces, there's little to no private provincial cooperation in achieving a form of sustainable busing. Today, many of us plan or compete for market share in busy corridors like Toronto to Ottawa. Open market focus financial resources on the big busy centers where there is volume and more money to be made. That approach does not work in the intercity bus sector. I asked the committee members to review the Coast to Coast Bus Coalition proposal. We signed a pledge to interline together nationally and work together with the federal government in creating a sustainable national bus network. We outlined an industry-driven private-public solution. I believe we need a National Highway Intercity Transportation Board and a National Essential Bus Transportation Act to lead us into the future. I believe that the federal government is responsible to connect Canada by bus, and in my view should be one of the key mandates of Infrastructure Canada. The federal government can and should include private coach operators in transit and rural transit funding. There's no reason why private operators like us should be excluded from the fund while municipalities can apply. The rural transit stream is not meant to solve the intercity rural transportation issues in its current form. This is because in an area like Northern Ontario, small townships and municipalities either don't have the capacity or don't make it a priority to improve transportation between them. And if the provinces doesn't take leadership, the entire regions are left inadequate services and disconnected from the rest of Canada. The federal government can introduce subsidies for private motor coach operators to help support the cross-provincial development of routes. For example, the U.S. government Essential Air Service Program gave $315 million largely to the smallest airlines in 2021 in the lower 48 states serving remote cities. Why not have a similar essential bus service program working a similar concept but geared towards intercity busing? The federal government can use direct funding to fund private motor coach operators, like tax incentives, tax rebates on fuel, or more direct project grants to correct various connectivity shortcomings. We are the most basic backbone of our intercity infrastructure. Where there is political will, solutions will be implemented. Intercity busing crosses provincial boundaries, and that should make it a federal matter, just like trains, airplanes, and ships. Only federal oversight in a federal plan will reconnect Canada. I ask our government to take responsibility for the transportation file and make it a federal mandate again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wabinski. To begin our line of questioning today, we have Mr. Lewis. Mr. Lewis, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to all the witnesses this evening. Certainly appreciate your testimony. I actually have quite a few questions, but I guess I would start out by saying, just in fairness to the witness, so my riding of Essex, it's down by Windsor, so next to the busiest international border crossing in North America. And I suppose, just to start off, Mr. Chair, this study could have simply been called Intercity Transport by Bus in Canada and the United States. Because for an area like myself with Windsor, there's a lot of cross-border, doctors go across on our transport system and nurses go across on our transport system. But I realize that's not what the study's studying, but I just had to bring that up because even as something as silly as a football game, the Detroit Lions, who, by the way, just lost their last one, but won 3 in a row, there's something called the tunnel bus or the special bus that many of our patrons would jump on to go to a Detroit Lions game, a Red Wings game, a Detroit Tigers game, and that actually, after 2.5 years, just opened up in the middle of November. So it truthfully does affect people's lives. First and foremost, Mr. Cassidy from Coach Atlantic Maritime Bus, I really respect you, sir, especially the fact that you said, although it's real tough, the industry's real tough, you said it's the right thing to do. And those are some pretty powerful words in the face of an industry that's, quite frankly, been relatively walked past. Mr. Cassidy, to you first, sir, and then I'll be following up the same question to Mr. Wabinski. Would it be fair to say that a lot of the struggles are due to labor shortages? So not only our drivers, but our mechanics as well. Mr. Cassidy, to you first, please, sir.
Well, thank you, Mr. Lewis. And definitely not. There has never been, in the history that we've been involved with the line run or intercity busing, and we celebrate tomorrow our 10th anniversary here in the Maritimes after Orleans surrendered their motor carrier rights in 2012. And our challenges have never been mechanics and or drivers.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Wabinski, sir.
I would also echo what Michael Cassidy has said, and I agree with that statement for us as well.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's actually mind-boggling because you're probably the only folks that I've met with in the last 1.5 years that have not screaming for labor. So, in my capacity as shadow minister for labor, that's good news. We always need a good news story. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Ms. Hanson, you spoke about private versus public transportation and message received. However, our public transit system, I'm going back to the example of Windsor, Detroit, in that it was shut down. So could you expand a little bit on that, please, because if I understood you correctly, basically what you said was if we don't keep it public, then we're kind of in trouble on the private side. Could you please expand somewhat on that?
Sure. I think there's lots of directions that can go, but let me start by saying the motive of private carriers is profit. And so if the route is not profitable, why would they continue having services on that route? And I think a case in point to this is in Saskatchewan, where the government said private carriers would take over when STC was shuttered. Out of, I believe it's 10 companies, private companies came forward. There's one that still exists, and it operates on 3 cities in the province because that's where it's profitable. So we have to start looking at public transportation as beyond the economic indicators of profitability on routes. And we need to look at it. There's so many other ways that it could be profitable. And I think Casper alluded to, charter services, those kinds of things. But I think there's also what's called a social audit. And this is where I think the federal government needs to do more study. I think we need to know the actual costs of operating or having areas of the province provinces that are not being serviced by buses. What is the actual cost in missed medical appointments? The actual cost in people unable to access, for example, vaccines, if that's their choice, for COVID. So it limits what people can do. And in the case of mobility, and my example with Terry, being unable to be a citizen in Canada because she had no mobility. And it took Transport Canada 2 years to resolve her issue, when in fact, The CEO of Transport Canada said, and I quote here from a study.
Very quickly, please, Ms. Hansen. Very
Okay,
quickly.
accessibility is a fundamental human right, and we are committed to ensuring that this right is realized in practice.
Thank you, Ms. Thank you. I'm sorry, ma'am. I've only got 30 seconds left. Very quickly, through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Gemmell, with the FCM. You know, a little bit concerned about tourism. We're just starting to get going here again, and we have to talk about tourism. Can you tell me what is FCM's thoughts, feelings, and I've only got about 10 seconds. What can we do to enhance our tourism sector?
Well, in 10 seconds, one of the things that SCM is focused on is the future of federal infrastructure programming. And we've heard from members that infrastructure is part of rebuilding, especially downtowns in larger urban centers post-pandemic, and to support attractions and to help bring tourists back. I will say, in the context of this study,
sorry, Mr. Gemmell, I'm going to have to end it there and turn it over to our next line of questions, which will be led by Mr. Chahal. Mr. Chahal, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for all the witnesses for your testimony today. I'm going to start with maybe Dr. Halasan and then go with Dr. Hansen afterwards. The federal government offered to work with provinces to restore some routes after Greyhound withdrew from Western Canada. To your knowledge, how did the government of Saskatchewan respond to this offer? Dr. Halasan, if you could maybe go first.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so that's a very good question. In the case of Saskatchewan, they actually rejected the federal government's offer of financial support in the context of the loss of the Saskatchewan Transportation Company. And for many, in many ways, it was probably because the closure of the STC was likely connected to ideological reasons. And so it's not entirely clear why a company that was shut down for not making money would, a government would refuse to take money to make sure that that company can run. So, and we've written some of this stuff up and published it in academic journals that, ideological considerations are probably the most logical explanation to use to make sense of such a decision by our government in response to the federal government.
Thank you for that. That's sad to hear that that's why they're making decisions. Dr. Hansen, would you like to comment as well?
Well, I think that just speaks to the need for a nationally led transportation system, and one that engages a broad base of citizens across the country. And I think it's time that Canada doesn't have a lot of transportation studies. There are a lot that have been done internationally. I think it's time, Transport Canada or Transportation and Infrastructure Canada did fund some SHRC work that we were privileged to participate in. But I think, there is room for a lot more work in terms of what's the cost of not having a national transportation system.
Very good. Thank you. And I'm going to go back to Dr. Halasan. The withdrawal of Greyhound occurred shortly after the government of Saskatchewan closed the Saskatchewan Transportation Company. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes. So just not very long after, STC was shut down in 2017, May of 2017, and by 2018, Greyhound withdrew from most of Western Canada.
Okay, so that's I think a very important point there. And I want to stay with you, and then I'll go to Dr. Hansen afterwards. Which communities were most affected in Saskatchewan that have you seen from the shutdown or the closure and with Greyhound leaving?
Yeah, so it's hard for me to respond for Greyhound, but I would respond more for the STC, which was serving Saskatchewan residents before, Greyhound withdrew. But at the time the STC was operating, it was serving 253 communities. So that's a big number compared to what Dr. Hansen was saying about 3 communities now being serviced by the private courier. So it was a well-connected system. And I think in many cases, the two are related, the STC closure and the Greyhound closure, partly because, they feed each other, right? So if a person knows that, they can travel out of Saskatchewan and join another bus which is connected to Greyhound and go to Manitoba or some other place, then the two are connected. So if STC is lost because of whatever reason and Greyhound can no longer receive the passengers that they would have received through the STC, then it affects Greyhound's ability to operate as well. And so these things are interconnected in some ways. And so I would say that, we've moved from 253 communities to, I would say, 3 communities. And so that gives you a sense of the level of change we're talking about.
Dr. Hansen, can you comment on which communities that were most affected in the province of Saskatchewan?
Well, ditto to what Dr. Alhassan is saying, but also I think, what this also illustrates is an inter-community, inter-city, inter-regional, all of these aspects of a transportation system are interconnected. And we can't address one without addressing the other ones. And when you ask me what's been affected, I think about my last ride to my home community, which is north of Prince Albert, and I see the person trying to ride the bicycle with a sign on the back that says, "Please give me a ride."
Thank you. Yes, Dr. Alhassan, you commented that I believe in your opening austerity budget, a cut of $85 million, what the savings were. If you had to restore that service again today, what would that cost look like? Do you have an estimate?
No, unfortunately, I don't have an estimate, but I know it'll be far more than what it was assumed it would save. So the STC's budget per year was, not above 20 million. So this $85 million was supposed to be the savings for a 5-year period. In terms of the actual cost of restarting, so the buses have been sold off. We're talking 41 buses have been sold off. The people have been, they no longer work for the STC. So it's much harder to maintain something like that than to restart it. So it'll be a little bit more costly. But of course, as I think a couple of people have mentioned, we also have to think about the cost of the status quo. The current situation we have is even far more costly than the $85 million or the cost of restarting. The cost of people not going to hospital, the cost of
Thank you
people...
very much, Mr. Alhassan, and thank you, Mr. Chahal. Prochainement, nous avons Monsieur Barcelou.
And now we will hear from Mr. Barcelou-Duval. The floor is yours, sir. You have 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. To begin with, I'd like to thank the witnesses here with us today, sharing information about intercity bus transport and what's really going on there. I've learned a good deal from you. From Quebec, we don't necessarily see all the reality on the ground out in Western Canada, and it's really disturbing to see how traumatizing the loss of Greyhound has been out west, because witness after witness comes to tell us about it, whereas in Quebec, perhaps it's something that didn't seem as difficult for us. We do have intercity transportation systems that were hit by the pandemic, of course, but I can't say that we have run into such a difficult crisis as the people in the West have had to live with. I would like to know, Mr. Cassidy, earlier in your opening statement told us that the private sector might be admissible. You think it would be a good idea to funding for intercity transport, given that that business isn't necessarily a money-making one. I myself have met many autocar and bus operators in Quebec, and what they said is they found it difficult to survive the pandemic because they had no assistance to help pay for their buses, for example. They could get support for their workers, for rent and so on, but the buses had to be upkept as well. I imagine that you ran into much the same problems. A program of that nature, which would allow for a recovery, resumption of services, thanks to the care given to infrastructure, that might make sense. it might make it possible to resume services to compensate for the difficulties that your business has been through. I also understand that there seems to be a common will to head for carbon neutrality, less greenhouse gas emissions, for example. So I'm wondering if a program for the electrification of buses would it be of any interest to you?
Will be coming to the bus industry in the future. But when we think of electrification on a motor coach, we have to think of range and we have to think of battery storage. The battery storage is underneath our bus where you usually see suitcases or parcels when it comes to the line run business. So a motor coach electric would not be practical when you cannot travel the kilometers that we do on a daily basis for range. And we literally have no storage underneath our bus. And again, passengers and parcels have to use that storage. The other thing is, today, we could say that a diesel brand new bus is approximately $720,000, $725,000. You might be looking at $1.2 million for an electric motor coach. So pricing alone is another contributing factor that would suggest electric today for line run is not practical. Yet I could turn it around in our public transit operation in Greater Charlottetown. I could tell you that electrification for public transit municipal streets, it is practical. There is government funding to help on the pricing, and you certainly have your range. But it's the Public Transit Infrastructure Fund that is driving the electrification in the municipal. And as I said in my opening remarks, public transit on provincial highways should be treated no differently than public transit on municipal streets.
En fait, ce que vous nous dites un peu, c'est que
So it sounds like what you're saying is that the technology hasn't advanced far enough to allow for, such a program. It wouldn't help, in your opinion, to help recovery in your sector. But if not that, is there anything else that you could tell us about how we can help you resume services? The topic of our study is of great interest, but we're likely to be told that transportation is a municipal or provincial jurisdiction. So if we want to respect everyone's jurisdictions, what type of federal intervention could actually be of help to you?
In remarks, we had the letter from the 4 Atlantic provinces where jurisdiction is not a problem in their minds. They are willing to assist. They are willing to collaborate with the federal government. And I think that is very important. This is not an issue of jurisdiction. This is an issue of getting something done because it's the right thing to do. And when you have 4 Atlantic provinces writing the Minister of Transport and the Minister of Infrastructure willing to contribute to the acquisitions of buses in a line run situation, I think that is very favorable, to the point that I have tried to position the Atlantic provinces as a pilot study so we can understand exactly what is happening in this business and we can take the program across the country. Maritime bus, we heard last week in your meetings here, we have 7 terminals. We cross-ship parcels. We live on a feeder system. We support 40 communities in our region. We have low revenue producing routes and we want to stay supporting. But at the same time, an infrastructure program that could help us with the capital cost of our buses, it would lower the amount of payments that we make. That extra cash flow can help us make it sustainable.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cassidy, and merci beaucoup, Mr. Barcelou-Duval.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barcelou-Duval.
The floor is yours. You have 6 minutes.
Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses. This has been an excellent bit of testimony, and I think very useful for our study. I'd like to start with Dr. Alhassan. At the outset, you called for a national public transportation system. a lot of our conversation over the course of this study has been about the pros and cons between a public model versus a private model or some sort of hybrid in between. Could you lay out what you see as the main advantages of a public model?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the question. I think that there are many advantages to be gained from relying on a public model. The first is that we eliminate the prioritization of profit and we focus on other considerations that are quite important, like thinking of mobility as a human rights issue. What do you think of public transportation as a tool to the achievement of a number of goals beyond profit? It opens up opportunity for Canada to take on a certain kind of leadership in how we think about public transportation. So, for example, think about climate change. I just gave the example of if 50 people are in a bus, we're saving 50 cars from being on the road. If you make these things private, if you think of transportation as a private approach rather than a public approach, the thing is that there are often communities that end up being left out just because they don't, make enough money on those routes. And I think the STC example is a very good one of moving from serving 253 communities to picking the 3 communities that you think are the most profitable. Again, if we use a public model, then we start to think more carefully about the possibilities of making sure that people can have access to goods and services in a way that private providers may not necessarily have those considerations. In some cases, they might. I'm sure that there are private companies who may have the interest in, running a route, even though that route doesn't have the profit that is needed. But for the most part, that cannot be expected from most private companies. And so the reason why I keep pushing for a national public transportation system is that we get out of that problem of people refusing to run certain routes because they believe that route is not profitable. We can start to prioritize equity. We can start to make sure that particular groups, so people with disabilities, Indigenous communities, racialized communities, these are communities that are often excluded. So we are able to actually prioritize those groups' ability to access goods and services in a way that is fair and guided by human rights principles.
Thank you, Dr. Alhassan. Turning now to Dr. Hansen. Dr. Hansen, is passenger transportation unique, or is it part of a larger trend affecting rural Canada? Nope.
Sorry, Dr. Hansen, you're on mute.
Okay. I could basically speak on that, I think, from the example of STC, where it was, passenger transportation, but it was also charters, which were profitable. And it was also the system of, bringing goods from one location to another, again, which is profitable. So there are profit arms of a public transportation system. I'm not sure if that totally answers your question, but I also wanted to just point out that both scholars and politicians in Mexico and the US have both advocated for a mobility bill of rights. So there is, if Canada could get behind this, and I think we have a Minister of Transport that's supportive of this, I think it moves us in a direction of seeing mobility, mobility rights as human rights. But I also want to talk about the environment, and this is also a way for Canada to achieve their environmental goals.
Thank you, Dr. Hansen. Turning now to Mr. Gemmell, I'm wondering, Mr. Gemmell, if you can characterize the current status of the conversation around this idea of an interconnected national passenger bus transportation network. What's the status of the intergovernmental conversation on that topic?
Sure, thanks, Mr. Beckrek. Great to get a question from a former mayor. I would say that from FCM's perspective, that conversation is not advancing very quickly. I think we're very encouraged that this committee is is studying the issue. I would say aside from this committee study, we're not seeing signs of progress on this file. We're not seeing the same kind of interest from the federal government in intercommunity passenger bus service that we are on urban public transit. I need to sort of echo remarks earlier from Mr. Cassidy, and just to underline remarks I made in my opening, we have an excellent partner in the federal government on urban public transit. We've had significant support for capital, purchasing buses and other investments in infrastructure for public transit from successive governments, from the previous Conservative government and since 2015 with the current government. And importantly, we've seen just in the last couple of years the creation of a new fund, the Rural Transit Solutions Fund, that's expanding that support, that partnership beyond cities to smaller communities. But as has been noted, that fund was designed and scoped to support transit within a small town or on a regional basis to connect a rural region to that town. Critically important, something FCM absolutely supports.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gemmell. And thank you, Mr. Bachrach. Prochainement, nous avons Monsieur Martel.
Now we'll move to Mr. Martel. You have the floor, sir, for 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. To begin with Mr. Jacob, you've told us that some regions are more ill-served. And which regions?
I guess we can think of it in a geographical sense, and we can also think of it in terms of communities of people. So geographically, we're talking rural areas that have smaller populations. These are areas that often end up being neglected. And I think the other groups of people that we can think about who often get excluded and underserviced would be people with disabilities, indigenous communities, and other people living in vulnerability. They often may, lose out because their routes are not enough, or there are not enough people to board the buses if they are private, and so the private bus providers may decide to simply pull out of such areas.
So out of curiosity, the actual runs, are the line runs adequate, or would we need new infrastructure for goods transport? Mr. Jacob, because you're telling us that rural areas are not well served, handicapped people, indigenous communities, but are the bus routes sufficient if we relied solely on a private system?
That's a good question. I think it's difficult to respond comprehensively, although I would say that in the case of a place like Saskatchewan, there was a well-established system for traveling through the bus system. So if, for example, there was a desire to create a public bus system that would come to, say, Saskatchewan, there would be an existing infrastructure by and large, but there might be areas in other parts of the country where they have lost public transportation options for a much longer period. And so for such areas, it might mean that much more infrastructural investment will be needed to kickstart and restart things in some of those areas that have been underserved for much longer.
Merci.
Thank you. My next question is for Mr. Wybinski. In 2018, Greyhound Canada announced that it would massively reduce many of its routes, specifically in Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, as well as in BC. Yet the company tried to remain alive and kicking by keeping its project in Ontario and Quebec. But we do know that the pandemic, COVID-19, rolled in, and the government stopped all movement and traveling, and that was like kicked Greyhound Canada right out of the business. And they put an end to their services in the last two provinces they had survived in, Quebec and Ontario. One of the reasons for this, that they say, is that they had 81% less passengers since 2010. I would like to know, you who own a company similar to Greyhound's, have you seen a considerable drop in ridership since 2010?
I would like to say that our ridership has gone up since we entered the market. We entered the market in 2015. I think it's critical for a bus company to provide the kind of service that people want. And I think there's a misconception that buses are only for low-income people. There's 90% of the country that could be a bus customer and they're not. It's a matter of subsidies for people that can't afford it, and that's an easy solution to that. Ridership can actually go up and up from where it is if we give people what they want, and they want a safe, comfortable, and they want the experience. They want the kind of new Uber experience. They don't want to be cramped in on buses with uncomfortable seats. So our company has been working towards meeting those objectives. And we've been noticing our ridership went significantly up since 2015 to 2020. When COVID came, obviously, we're down 90%, but we're back to 90% pre-COVID revenue right now. But the ridership is still down because the cost of travel has gone up and not everybody has gone back to the old way of doing things. And a lot of people still travel less than before. But we see that trend continuing up over the next 5 years.
Can I share with you? Est-ce que je peux? C'est fini? Combien?
10 seconds left. All right, I'll let that drop then. Forget it. Thank you very much, Mr. Martel.
Ms. Koutrakis, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all our witnesses for your very valuable testimony this afternoon. This is a very important study, and I'm very pleased that my colleagues and I agreed to have this on the records. I'd like to start with Dr. Hansen, if I may. You mentioned in your testimony social audit. I'd like to know a little bit more about that and what kind of data is missing to evaluate the socioeconomic impacts of declining intercity bus travel. What don't we know, and what should we know?
When STC was shuttered in the province of Saskatchewan, one of the things that we continually asked the auditor to do is to provide a social audit of, because the government said it was done on cost. What we wanted to know is what was the actual cost. So the social audit would include things like people missing medical appointments. The transportation of blood products in Saskatchewan was done by the provincial bus company, by STC. So blood was transported safely from one location to another. That is now being done by taxi. So if you can imagine the increased cost on the private sector when these public goods are taken away, the library books were all shipped by the public bus system. Those interlibrary loans are now done by private courier. So again, the costs when you put these public items into the private sector actually increase. So all of that would be shown in a social audit. And you had a first question, so I'm
what the socioeconomic impacts of declining intercity bus travel.
Yes, so those are some of them. And then, of course, other ones are things like people not having access to get out of a situation. For example, some of the drivers told us about picking up people who are fleeing situations of abuse in their home communities. They no longer can exit those communities because they don't have a safe way out. So public buses provide a way out of very situations that make people vulnerable. And the Highway of Tears is an example of that.
Well, that's a great segue, because my next question to you was if you could please elaborate for us on the gendered effects of declining intercity bus travel.
Yeah, so what STC actually found, and I'm using them as an example because they had really good statistics, which again, we need more of in Canada in terms of the bus systems. Most of the people that rode buses, 60% were women, 71% were vulnerable populations. So first of all, when we look at that stat, we see that the majority of bus users in the province were women. So you also have to look at aging populations, women tend to live longer. Seniors are generally more dangerous drivers. I don't mean that in a bad way, but as an aging woman, I can say that. But public buses, as Jacob alluded to that in the beginning of his talk about OECD, are in general safer modes of transportation, and they're also less polluting. So there's a whole bunch of reasons there that, I guess those are part of the gendered effects. However, the Canadian government really needs to do a GBA plus analysis of the impacts of having transportation, public and private, in Canada, and what would be the best system to use for an inter-community approach.
I'm also interested to learn, besides, Greyhound now leaving this vacancy and other, private operators hopefully stepping in, what are some of the other primary factors that we have been seeing declining intercity bus travel? Are there other factors besides just private operators shutting down?
Well, I guess, some of the other factors would be people having access to loved ones. Another factor in the province of Saskatchewan is where you have a mother and father living in different communities. Children through social services are now being put on taxis with social workers. So you look at the time social workers spend with people, plus the use of private carriers. So those would be some of the impacts. People can't get from one province to the other because there aren't always bus systems that exist interprovincially. So there's all, access to specialists, there's health costs, etc.
Thank you very much, Ms. Koutrakis. Prochainement, nous avons Monsieur
And now we'll go to Mr. Brasselieu-Duval. You have the floor, 2.5 minutes. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I've been listening carefully to Ms. Hansen and Dr. Jacob, who've really been speaking very passionately in favor of a federal transport system, something along the lines of a Crown corporation, if I understand you correctly. But I'm wondering, there are other issues about transportation. Don't misunderstand me. I fully support public transit. For students, for example, it's very helpful for them on a daily basis, for retirees, or indeed for anyone who wishes to go from one place to another without using a car. Public transit counts. When it comes to federal government jurisdiction, however, we've had questions here to study about interprovincial air traffic, air transport, difficult to make it paying. We should also talk about train travel, for example, via Rails project. We're not quite sure if it's still working on it. It's high-frequency rail to link multiple cities. We've been just hearing about that for 3 elections now. I'm not sure if we'll ever see it on the ground. So I'm wondering about the federal government's responsibilities, its announcements about interurban and interregional transportation projects. There are many announcements, but nothing seems to actually get off the ground. So I'm wondering whether the federal government would really be the right place to look for a solution. Is it the right place to look for a solution? And it might lead simply to bickering about jurisdiction, among other things. I'm not sure whether the federal FCM, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, has anything to say to that. Thank you.
For that question. Our view certainly is that there is a role for the federal government. I think this is an area of shared jurisdiction is the way that we would describe it. And I would draw the parallel again to public transit in an urban context. I mean, there you have a clear jurisdiction for municipal governments, but public transit systems are funded by provincial governments and by the federal government, and increasingly by the federal government. As I noted, we have a very strong partner in the federal government when it comes to urban public transit. And so I don't see any reason, and other witnesses have suggested, there's no reason why the federal government couldn't play a bigger role going forward. And to the point around the diversity of the regional needs in this country, there's really, I think, a role for the federal government around coordination. There's many different models that could be adopted to implement a national transportation system, and the federal government really is best placed to play that coordination.
Thank you
role.
very much, Mr. Gemmell. Merci, Mr. Barcelouval. Next, we have Mr. Bachrach. Mr. Bachrach, the floor is yours. You have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the topic of jurisdiction, I had this conversation with our current transport minister, and he said very clearly that in his view, buses are provincial jurisdiction, and the federal government is willing to help, but the provinces need to show the leadership. Dr. Hansen, I'm wondering what your reaction to that kind of statement is.
Well, I think
I know.
we have a situation in Canada where we have some provinces that think they have the lead on a lot of issues, but I think in the case of a national transportation system, if we look at it not just from the perspective of buses, but as a centralized network, a transportation system, I think that can help build something that is national. And from that, there can be networks and other systems that take place interprovincially. So I think part of that is thinking outside of the box. I think it's also about looking at what happens when we don't have those systems and the vulnerabilities of places and people within communities that don't have access to public transportation.
I'm going to try rapid fire for my remaining seconds, Mr. Chair. Mr. Wybinski, where should we be looking for leadership in order to achieve the vision that everyone's talking about nationally? Who needs to lead?
We should create a National Highway Transportation Department, a board that would be dedicated towards managing buses. I don't believe provinces will ever come to terms. It has to be the feds. And the only way to do this in a timely manner across the nation is to centralize this right in the federal government, maybe infrastructure ministry or transport. That's my belief and understanding over the last 3 years.
And Mr. Cassidy, where should the leadership lie?
It should be a working collaboration, no differently than what we've done here at the Maritime Provinces. We have the 4 provinces speaking to the federal government. What model can we have for the Atlantic provinces? It's a working together model.
Okay, and Dr. Alhassan, who should lead this conversation?
I would say that the federal government needs to take a little bit of leadership and work in collaboration with the provincial governments to identify communities that are clearly missing out and make sure that we have a national system so that wherever you live within Canada, you are not completely excluded from accessing very, very basic services, as we have seen through the research we've been doing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bachrach, and thank you, Dr. Alhassan. I believe I referred to you earlier as Mr. I want to apologize for that. My wife would never let me forget about that, given that she's also a doctor. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Lewis. The next line of questioning is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank all the witnesses for the testimony today. It's been very, very informative. And my first question is for Mr. I don't think I wrote it down properly, but Jenner Mall? Yes, through the chair. You had spoken about a zero emissions transport system, and you had stated that that is something that you wish to reach by 2050. And you also spoke about a national transportation system and a rural transit fund. Now, Mr. Cassidy had stated that for, I believe he said coach transport, passenger transportation, that it would not be financially viable to have an electrified system. So how is it that you propose that you will reach a zero emissions transport, a carbon neutral system by 2050? Can you give us some insight into that?
Sure. I think that question's for me. Thanks, Dr. Lewis, for the question. So a few points on that. I mean, 2050 is recognized under the Paris Climate Agreement as the target for reaching zero emissions for the globe to be able to limit global temperature increase to no greater than 1.5 degrees Celsius. So that's why that's the target. In terms of the technology and the economics of reaching that, I'll draw another parallel to urban transit. In recent years, it was not economic for urban public transit systems to adopt zero emission bus technologies. The cost of batteries has come down immensely, the cost of the bus, and the total cost of ownership because of the lower operating costs of electric buses has come down significantly. And as a result of increased leadership from the federal government through the Zero Emission Transit Fund that was announced 2 years ago, we're seeing a lot of progress in urban transit shifting to 100% zero emission. It's important to note, and I think Mr. Wabinski mentioned this earlier, transit is inherently lower emission than single passenger vehicle regardless. So, I mean, the near-term objective is get more people on buses in the urban context or in the intercommunity context. But as we look ahead in the decades to come, I think it can be expected, and Mr. Cassidy alluded to this, that the cost of batteries, the battery technology will come down, will enable longer ranges for electric buses in a coach, intercity coach context. And then other technologies, hydrogen most promisingly, which has big upside for the Canadian economy as Canada positions itself to be a world-leading hydrogen producer, also come into play and have particular promise in a longer range, heavier-duty transportation context.
My next question would be for Mr. Wabinski. You had stated that operating in rural communities is at a loss, and it gives some explanation for why I myself live in a rural community and there is absolutely no public transportation in Halderman, Norfolk, my community. How do we overcome that loss, and how do we move away from the economic factors that are constraining that development?
I've proposed a model of subsidy based on specific to the route, like they do in America with the feeder lines, an essential air service program, but convert that to a bus system. If there's routes that have to be built up, and routes take time to build up, when you start a route, you may be losing money for 8 months, 10 months. And you're not just failing to break even, you're not making enough money to pay the cost. There may be very few people on that bus initially, especially going to small communities. You need to be able to run that service long enough, reliably enough, with the right size fit vehicle on the right frequency, long enough for people to trust it. And once they start trusting it, people will start getting on board. Now, I think I'm the master of running low volume routes. I have the lowest volume routes in Canada, and I can make them work. But, it's a very simple formula. The cost of running has to be recovered in the ticket cost. And if that can't be recovered through ticket cost, then it has to be subsidized on a pay per route basis. I think that's the quickest, easiest solution to solve this problem of some routes not being revenue generating enough.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis, and thank you, Mr. Wabinski. Next, we have Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome to all of our witnesses today. And it's good to hear different stories and different parts of the country. But being from Newfoundland and Labrador, I'm going to focus on Mr. Cassidy and Atlantic Canada. I had numerous conversations with the owners of DRL during the COVID period. And went through some very challenging economic times and a very challenging environment for their bus line, and I'm sure you'll probably experience the same. So you've been in business for 10 years, and you're obviously in a very spread out area with low ridership at times. So were you able to take advantage of any of the COVID supports that were offered during that period just to survive?
Thank you very much, Mr. Rogers. We've had 18 years in the bus. Our line run anniversary tomorrow is the 10 years. And if it wasn't for the federal government's wage subsidies, rent subsidies, their government guaranteed loan working capital programs that were put in place, and Mr. Rogers, if it wasn't for the province of Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Prince Edward Island assisting Maritime Bus in 2020, 2021, our operating losses, which would be much greater than what they were in those 2-year periods. We're thankful to the federal government, but in the Maritimes, our 3 provinces are committed to line run operation. They showed it in COVID, and now Newfoundland Labrador has joined them in suggesting that they would be interested in discussing a capital infrastructure program here in the Atlantic provinces.
Thank you, Mr. Cassidy. And you've answered my second question here, but I'll go on to this question. I know you offered some solutions earlier in your testimony. I'd like for you to, take the opportunity to do it again in terms of moving forward. We went through a very difficult time. So what would you need to ensure long-term viability for your business? What are the things you specifically need done?
We had these challenges, Mr. Rogers, well before COVID, well before if you have labor shortages. These items have been discussed for years. Jason Roberts of DRL and I have spent time, and we can talk about Canada and we can talk about national systems, but we are regional in our country. In the Atlantic provinces, we are running expensive buses. We are providing an essential service. And as operators, Jason Roberts and myself are asking that rather than operating subsidies annually, perhaps we could change the language in new generation funding for capital infrastructure programs where we are asking for inner city busing to be an eligible project within the funds, no different than municipalities are eligible projects. And we're also suggesting that carriers like ourselves that are committed to Newfoundland, Labrador, and the Maritimes could us, as for-profit carriers, be eligible recipients of infrastructure funding. It's an eligible project, Mr. Rogers, and it's eligible recipients could allow assistance on a capital basis. Newfoundland, Labrador, Nova Scotia, PEI, New Brunswick, for what Mr. Roberts and I are asking for, may cost as an investment in capital of $8 million shared by 4 provinces. The federal government might be at an 8 to a 10 million contribution, and Mr. Roberts and myself could be at close to 8 million. That is a regional solution to inner city, because you can't have a national system, Mr. Rogers, unless there are sustainable bus carriers in each region. And that's what we are trying to suggest through DRL and Maritime Bus.
Thank you for that, Mr. Cassidy, and certainly made very clear what your position is and what you need going forward. So in terms of your relationship with DRL, have you ever considered or talked about how you can support each other, whether it be some kind of linkage in the business sector or some kind of merger? Any of that stuff ever discussed?
No, I think when we do discuss it, we are just 2 committed individuals in this business, and our sole intent is public transit on provincial highways. And DRL in your province of Newfoundland, Labrador, yes, we do get passengers getting on the ferry. We can meet in North Sydney and we can transfer back and forth. But really, sometimes, Mr. Rogers, it's moral support talking to another carrier that believes strongly in what we do each and every day. Before COVID, during COVID, and post-COVID.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rogers. Next, we have Mr. Strahl. Yes, he is. Mr. Strahl, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My first question is for Mr. Gemmell. To achieve the program and service levels that the FCM is looking for, I don't know if it was, can't recall in your presentation if you talked about a national public transportation system or a national bus transportation system. Whichever one it is, what is the ballpark, I guess, initial cost to the federal government, and what would be the annual cost? I assume that if we're asking for this type of investment from the federal government, that number, ballpark number at least, is available.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Mr. Strahl. So FCM hasn't done an estimate of the cost that's needed. I think a large part of what would go into that number is, are you talking about capital funding, as Mr. Cassidy is suggesting, from the federal government, or a broader support in terms of capital and operating, as well as the model, as we've been talking about, and there are a number of different models. What I would like to say is that the commitment to the Rural Transit Solutions Fund, so that's $250 million over 5 years. And we're seeing strong interest from municipalities, from nonprofit and from for-profit transit providers in that immediate regional context for that funding. And so we are calling for that type of program to be continued going forward. The federal government has committed $3 billion a year for the permanent public transit fund that's going to start. Currently, it's scheduled to start in the year 2026. And we would like to see a rural transit element of that. What is clear is that the amount I
only have 5 minutes, so I'm going to have to go back. So if we're saying that, Mr. Wabinski, perhaps I'll go to you now. You mentioned tax incentives, tax rebates on fuel. Can you give us an indication perhaps of the tax, perhaps the carbon tax, the amount of that carbon tax that you pay on fuel every year, or if you can get us that figure and include the amount that you receive in a rebate from the federal government? But perhaps you can talk, you mentioned tax incentives. I'm interested to hear if you flesh that out at all, if you have any specific tax incentives in mind to help incentivize that private investment.
I don't have the exact figure, but fuel taxes are a big part of the fuel cost, and fuel is a major cost of our operations right now until there is electrification technology that we can use.
Do you receive any rebate for the carbon tax that you are charged?
No, I don't receive any incentives right now on taxes or fuel rebates, which would be nice if we did.
Okay. So do you believe as well, you mentioned that there should be a subsidy on the routes, and I think you referenced a United States program to subsidize small regional carriers. In the Canadian context, do you believe that the federal government for all modes of transportation should be subsidizing all routes that carry passengers to ensure that they are profitable?
I believe that program would work because it would allow us to create non-profitable routes into sustainable routes, or non-sustainable routes into sustainable. So not all routes need subsidy. I like the idea of this program because it would allow to build up to routes that over time could become sustainable.
And do you have any idea what the cost for that initiative would be for, what would any level of government need to invest or spend in order to ensure that all routes that need to be made profitable are made profitable?
Well, thank you for that question. It depends on how far we go and how fast we can move. There's limited equipment available and it takes time to put infrastructure in place. So you don't want to go too hard, too fast right off the bat. But it could cost as little as $30 million a year from my estimates. And it could go up to 85, depending on how many remote communities or smaller communities we want to connect.
And is that for your company or for the
entire
province?
country, in the entire country?
But how? Okay, so we heard though that it was 85 million for STC to operate on its own. So how could the entire country's routes be subsidized for 30 to 85 million?
Based on Dr. Al-Hassan comment, it wasn't $85 million to operate the company. It was only 14.9 million subsidy from the province. Total cost was 85. They recovered that through ticket sales.
So for double the amount of their operating budget, we could subsidize every route in the country?
Yes, I believe that would be possible. And, you know, we only have, the Greyhound network was like 200 something communities connected. Now, depends how much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wabinski, and thank you very much, Mr. Stroll. Next, we have Mr. Badaway. Mr. Badaway, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'll preface my comments by saying this. This is all about leveraging, ensuring that the federal government takes into consideration our contributions. For example, the most recent contribution that we put forward in the 2021 budget, which was the Rural Transit Solutions Fund with $250 million over 5 years for planning and design grants, capital procurement and construction for a wide range of transit modes that meet rural community needs. The provincial government in my home province in Ontario puts together, I'll use the word mechanisms or levers, to allow municipalities to then, again, leverage federal funding. Some provinces are generous. Saskatchewan, for example, is not. They don't put anything forward. Ontario puts a bit. But more importantly is the leveraging that comes from municipalities for their transit systems. Currently, and this is a question that's going to go to the FCM, currently the Conservatives in Ontario are now planning a clawback for the ability for municipalities to collect development charges from developers who create growth-related capital or operational costs within those individual municipalities throughout the province of Ontario. And those growth-related costs, both operational and capital, include intermunicipal transit. With now that inability, municipalities are now handcuffed and by default are going to be relying upon property taxpayers to then foot the bill for those growth-related costs versus the developers that are creating those growth-related costs, such as intermunicipal transit. So with that said, the Conservatives in Ontario, the bottom line is that they're raising property taxes as well as other operational and capital growth-related costs such as water bills, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So with that, a question to the FCM, alongside AMO, for example, who I wish was here today too, what advocating are you doing currently in, for example, the province of Ontario to ensure that these costs don't fall on the property taxpayers, that they in fact are leveraged between the partners that they once were, for example, the federal, the provincial, the municipal levels of government, as well as the private sector that does create some of those growth-related costs?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Mr. Badaway. I'll start by saying that FCM's mandate is federal, and we don't advocate to individual provincial governments. My colleagues at the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, who mentioned, are active on Bill 23 on that question. As you probably know, they've estimated that the impact of Bill 23 in terms of limiting the ability of municipalities to collect development charges could cost as much as $1 billion a year in terms of municipal revenue for the 19 largest municipalities in Ontario. So it's significant. It's something our colleagues in Ontario are very concerned about and are looking closely at. I think it speaks to a bigger issue around how we fund municipal governments in this country. Recent Statistics Canada data came out last week showing that municipalities collect less than 9 cents on every tax dollar collected in the country. And yet the responsibilities for municipalities are only increasing, and we own and manage more than 60% of public infrastructure in the country. So it's part of a bigger discussion. And as it relates to transit, whether it's in an urban context or in an inter-community context. I think we need to look at partnership between orders of governments, including Indigenous governments, as I mentioned in my opening, in how we fund a system that, in FCM's view, would be a mixture of public, private, nonprofit carriers. We have that model in an urban context, and there's ways to expand it. Municipalities are expanding it. In an inter-community context, there is a role for municipalities, but given just the nature of the routes, it's less of a direct municipal responsibility or involvement. Though there are models where municipalities are contributing on an operating subsidy basis for services that pass through or serve their communities. So
thank you, Mr. Gemmell.
Sure.
I only got 30 seconds left, so I have one more question for you. With respect to the $250 million that the federal government gave you over 5 years from the 2021 budget, do you have any examples, or how are your members funding or using this funding to develop new and local solutions?
Sure. Yeah. So I mentioned there's a lot of interest from municipalities in either expanding existing fixed route transit services that they have in their communities, or many communities, small towns that didn't previously have a fixed route scheduled system, looking to develop that for the first time as a result of this funding, as well as an increased interest in on-demand services. So more of a shuttle bus service, or more of an Uber type model, but delivered publicly by the municipality, providing on-demand services within a rural region. And there's a number of examples in all regions of the country where municipalities.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gemmell. Thank you, Mr. Badaway. Prochainement, nous avons Mr. Barcelou.
And now we will hear from Mr. Barcelou-Duval. You have the floor, sir. You have 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My question as well will be for the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Mr. Bachrach mentioned this earlier. The Minister of Transport said that bus transportation would be a Quebec jurisdiction, provincial jurisdiction. In Quebec, we do have agreements in public transit, even infrastructure agreements entered into between the federal government and Quebec. A bilateral agreement, for example, to fund infrastructure in Quebec, signed by the federal government in 2018. In that agreement, there is mention that funds would be provided to the government of Quebec for projects, in particular for public transit, not only public transit infrastructure, but some capital infrastructure for public transit. We learned in this committee, when Mr. LeBlanc came before us, that during phase 1 of the agreement, an amount of $350 million hadn't been used, and based on the agreement, that amount should have been repurposed for the next phase. But unfortunately, Mr. Blanc said that the agreement was not being respected and that fund was being clawed back to the Treasury. 200 and some million were for public transit of that $350 million. And the Union of Quebec Municipalities campaigned to ensure that that amount go to Quebec as agreed in the original agreement. Now there's $2.7 million extra for capital infrastructure programming, which is at issue. Some of it would support public transit infrastructure. I'd like to know whether you support the Quebec's fight for this, whether you advocate for Quebec on this front. Yes, thank you for the question, Mr. Barcelou-Duval, and I will answer in English if you permit.
Following closely and in consultation with the Quebec Municipal Associations, UMQ, who you mentioned, as well as FQM. There's a shared objective here between the federal government, the province of Quebec, and municipalities to invest in public infrastructure, including in public transit, and that remains FCM's priority. There is a timeline in place to identify transit projects for that remaining money that you mentioned, and it's certainly our hope that the province of Quebec will identify projects within that timeline and ensure that that funding is invested in Quebec and benefits Quebecers.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gemmell. Merci beaucoup, Mr. Barcelou-Duval. Next, we have Mr. Bachrach. Mr. Bachrach, floor is yours. You have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is to Mr. Cassidy. I understand that your company has tried to integrate its schedules with passenger rail, and I'm wondering to what extent we should be talking about integrating bus and rail transportation as part of this overall conversation about passenger transportation in the country.
Thank you. It's very important when we talk intermodal. And when we started 10 years ago, we made sure that we were in the same terminal as Via Rail in Moncton, New Brunswick, and in the same terminal as Via Rail in Halifax, Nova Scotia. On the surface, it sounds great. Ground transportation, bus, rail. But unfortunately, we used to have interlining from Ontario through to the Maritime provinces, train, and our bus system. But I think you made mention of this last week. The train schedule doesn't live up to the times, and our buses depart after the trains arrive late, normally over 60, 70, 80% of the time. So if we do have intermodal service, whether it's air, whether it's train, whether it's bus, there has to be a working relationship with schedules, reliability, and consistency, because it's the passenger we have to think about here. It's seamless ticket travel to allow them to get from point A to point B. And right now, we do not have that.
My last question, it's been 4 years since Greyhound left Western Canada. It's been 1.5 years since Greyhound left Canada altogether. And based on this study so far, it doesn't feel like we're particularly close to even replacing what Greyhound offered, which people love to complain about. But they did offer a one-ticket ride from coast to coast, connecting hundreds and hundreds of communities across Canada. Now, my question, and I think almost any of the witnesses could take a stab at this, but perhaps I'll ask Mr. Gemmell, what's the single ingredient that we're missing at this juncture? Like, why is progress so slow, and why are we lacking progress towards that goal of a truly interconnected, single national system for bus transportation?
20-second response, please.
Thank you. I think, it's understandable that the context of this committee study is, Greyhound pulling out of Canada. But as you know, quite rightly noted, it's not as if we had a great passenger bus service system for all regions of the country before Greyhound. This was a concern that has been raised through FCM, through our rural forum, for many years before Greyhound left Canada. And so I really think it does require it being made a political priority at the provincial level and at the federal level. That a concerted effort to coordinate regional services, as Mr. Cassidy mentioned.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gemmell. And thank you, Mr. Bachrach. Next, we have Mr. Strahl once again. Mr. Strahl, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. My question is about, and I heard Mr. Bachrach characterize a conversation he had with the Minister of Transport. I wasn't there. I don't know if that was in QP or just a private conversation where he talked about the provincial leadership in this matter. And I want to talk about my home province of British Columbia, where, for instance, you can now get, and it's not across the country, but you can get from Hope in my riding, which is about 7,000 people in the region, all the way into downtown Vancouver or the Vancouver International Airport on BC Transit and TransLink buses. That's about a 150-kilometer journey. There's long stretches between where there's no passengers, but it stops along the way. Number of First Nations communities, etc. So there has been a build out that has happened in British Columbia, and particularly it was mentioned earlier in testimony about the Highway of Tears, or Highway 16 in northern British Columbia, where there has been significant action taken to provide service, not only through expanding BC Transit, but working with collaborating with private service like taxis, ride hailing, not-for-profit, senior shuttles, Friendship Center buses, BC Bus North, Northern Health Connections, etc. So the BC Transit service provides that service, that gap that was left and was very concerning for those communities in northern British Columbia. So I guess my question is, I mean, I'm hearing a lot about there needs to be I would describe it made in Ottawa solution for the entire country. How do we ensure that things that are working, we don't build? Why are we not looking at models that are working and building, encouraging other provinces to adopt them, rather than saying, we need a centralized national busing system that will it seems a lot of the commentary is directed at one province, but we're not looking at the successes of other provinces like British Columbia. So can we talk about provincial leadership and how we build on that, as opposed to simply looking for a national solution that perhaps ignores the reality in certain parts of the country? So I'll throw that open. I saw Mr. Cassidy, Mr. Babinski, perhaps you want to take the first run.
Well, you're certainly right. We have to talk nationally, but before we talk nationally, let's get the regional house in order. You need sustainable bus carriers regionally before we can go nationally. And there are many, many good operations in this country. We heard today where we have gaps, and I agree with the gaps that have been identified. But before we start talking full public, public-private, full private, let's understand what we have, take inventory with what we have, and BC government certainly stepped up to the plate during COVID to help your provincial carriers, like Quebec, like Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and PEI. They stood up and they want to make sure we have interlining for the future. Start there with those provinces that have the leadership and put their money on the table in 2020, 2021. They want leadership, and they just want to work with the federal government to put a program in place. It's very straightforward.
Thank you,
I would add to that exactly, we got to know what we have, and we got to work and build on what we got. And that's why I think like a team on like a board, National Highway Transportation Board, or a committee or a department dedicated to this file could take care of that inventory and work on filling those gaps through capital subsidies or per route subsidies, and each route is its own separate case. And that's going to take time. It may be a team of 50 people, accountants, transportation experts, lawyers, social, and you build out a national strategy. This is not going to happen with 5 people. You're going to need a small team of people that know what they're doing to connect what we have and help us fill those gaps.
Right. How much time do I have, Mr. Chair?
You have 18 seconds, Mr. Strahl.
All right. In the previous meeting, we heard about the need for a clearinghouse so that schedules could be shared between carriers right across the country. Would you support that work or that recommendation that sort of a thing be created as a first step?
Many carriers have reservation systems now where we can share our information and have seamless travel for parcels and passengers. But we need a communication platform, yes, for sure, for all carriers. If you're going to do any form of interlining, you need a communication system. We used to be with Greyhound in New Orleans at midnight trying to find out if we had enough seats for passengers traveling Ontario, Quebec into the Maritimes. We had a manual system, but we did it for seamless travel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cassidy, and thank you very much, Mr. Strahl. And finally, this evening, we have Mr. Iacono. Mr. Iacono, la parole est à vous. Vous avez 5 minutes.
You have 5 minutes, Mr. Iacono. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank our witnesses for being so patient with us, staying with us into the evening to help set us on the right track. Ms. Hansen, Do you know whether there are any initiatives run by Indigenous people which aim to bring back intercity transport?
The way most First Nations governments are structured, there are local initiatives taking place in different communities. And I know that, for example, in Saskatchewan, there's some that operate small vans that go from their community into an urban center where they can get access to mainly healthcare. But I also know that, those are inconsistent in the way services are provided. There is also an example, though, where the federal government just started a free service from L'Orange to Prince Albert to meet one of the gaps that's happening in the province. But again, it's short term, it's an individual case. We need something that's, built from the ground up. And I think lots of people have talked about who needs to be involved. I think it's really important that we don't forget that citizens need to be involved. And if 70% of users on buses are marginalized populations, how are we involving the users that we presently have? And secondly, the other point I want to make that hasn't been made is about automobility. We need to change the mindset of Canadians around the idea that we need to have a car to go everywhere. We've got the roads. Let's use them for public services like buses.
Donc, Madame, est-ce que ces initiatives locales...
So, these local initiatives, are they successful? You said there was a goodwill behind them, but are they succeeding?
I can't give an informed opinion about that or an informed response.
Merci. Dr. Halassan, dites-nous...
Dr. Al-Hassan, I'm sorry. Could you tell us what Indigenous people who used to count on bus transport are now doing?
Yes, thank you very much for the... I think for the most part, people are hitchhiking. In my research, I can give you very specific examples of people who walked 2 to 3 days to access healthcare. I spoke to such people, I've met them. And so many people are using very unsafe methods because they have no other option to be able to travel across cities, depending on where they are. So I have encountered people who literally walk for multiple days on a highway to access health and other services.
Merci, docteur. Est-ce que vous avez des données qui sont...
Thank you, doctor. Do you have any data? You said that you have carried out research. Could you share with us some of the data, some of your findings? Yes, of course.
Des matières d'urgence ou autres?
I think I missed some of it.
Mr. Chair, would you want me to repeat the question?
Yes, if you'd like to, Mr. Yakino.
Merci.
Thank you. So, Dr. Al-Hassan, my question is, do you have any data, given that you mentioned that you've carried out research? Could you share some of the findings? And is the need solely for travel, for medical care, or are there everyday needs as well?
So first of all, I'm willing to share that information. Some of it is published. I have a 300-page PhD thesis specifically on this topic. I interviewed 100 people. So it's a big, group of people that we've spoken to about this. But in summary, people have had to walk for healthcare services like I'm describing, but some of the travel is also just to visit your family member, and some of it is to access other services within the city beyond healthcare services. And as we know in health, there are what we call social determinants of health. So apart from access in healthcare. If a person cannot have access to nutritious food because it's more expensive within their community, and because of transportation they cannot access that, then it has a connection to health as well. So there's quite a bit that can be shared, and I'm more than willing to tender in a few published journal articles as needed.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Iacono, and thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you, Mr. Iacono.
I've been asked by the clerk to kindly ask that you submit an executive summary of your several hundred-page report. He will actually send you guidelines for that, so we very much appreciate that. It'll be very helpful. And with that, I want to, on behalf of all members, thank our witnesses for their time and their testimony this afternoon/evening. This meeting is now adjourned.